Whenever you come to the fork in the road, take it. I observed a lot by watching, and I never gave up because I believe that it ain't over till it's over. Okay? But enough of those for now. I'll get back to them later. First of all, I want to thank Vice President Worth and Dean Gold. I approached them with this idea of doing a last lecture, and they were very supportive. And if things go wrong, blame them. Okay? But it was great because, when I decided to retire, my wife, Ann, who's right here, and other people said, well, do you want a retirement party? And I said, no, I'd rather do what I've enjoyed doing for the last 29 years. And that's been teaching both as an adjunct and full-time. I want to share some of my thoughts with you that I've learned over the years. Now, they're life experiences. And I got to say to you this as I look out there, I have been most of your age. Most of you have not been 70 years old, okay? So I'm going to ramble on probably about my life experiences. Now, why I wanted to do this last lecture, because it's not a new idea. It's been going on for centuries over in England, places like Oxford and Cambridge. They always have a professor give the last lecture just before finals, and that ends their academic year. Some schools have even adopted it to have a last lecture series. At the college that I taught at before coming here, the University of Great Falls, we had one. I was fortunate enough to give a last lecture, and you're going to hear part of that today, okay? Now, before I start, I need to do a little housekeeping, so to speak. You as my students, they're laughing already. This is my typical approach, all right? First, I got to describe the two places I grew up. Amboy, where I lived during the school year, and Ontario Point, where I spent my summers. Now, Amboy is a small hamlet about 7 or 8 miles from the city of Syracuse. It was a blue-collar and farming area. It had a 2-room schoolhouse, which I'm a proud alumnus of, okay? A small grocery store, gas station, and a Presbyterian church, all right? It was once the home of the Syracuse Airport, all right? Charles Lindbergh, Amelia Earhart, and many other notables had landed there over the years. At one point, Amboy was a pretty important place, okay? Until World War II, when they decided they needed a larger area and longer runways to accommodate military aircraft, all right? So by the time I was born, the airport property had been sold to a large industrial company, and where much of the airport was used was converted into large lagoons where the industrial company dumped its soda ash waste. So as it was affectionately said, we grew up next to the waste beds, okay? That might be why I act some of the ways I do in that too, okay? Fortunately, they had a couple of runways left, which was connected and made a half-mile oval. And that became our playground with a lot of open fields around it. We had go-karts, mic rods, and when we got older, we drove lot cars, as it was called, out in the fields. Everything now that would not be allowed because it was unsafe, dangerous, or illegal. But we did it. And little did I know at that time that experience racing cars and that would prepare me very well for driving here in Fayetteville. Okay. Now, Ontario Point, on the other hand, I can only describe it by reciting part of the lyrics from the musical Peter Pan. There is a place where dreams are born and time is never planned. It's not on any chart. You must find it in your heart. Never, never land. Well, that's what I grew up with. It was located on the shores of Lake Ontario, about 50 miles north of Syracuse. Both sets of my grandparents had bought cottages up there during the Depression. It's where my parents met, and it's where we fortunately were into the fourth or the fifth generation of living up there. Those guys you see up there on the screen own a place up there. My sister owns a place, and we own a place. Most of my friends that I grew up with are still there. Last summer, I was with a bunch of them. We were talking, and we're now all retiring together. And I figured the only difference is we don't have to go to the sand dunes to drink anymore. But that was it. So now the second bit of housekeeping is I promised Ann that I wouldn't curse during this presentation. This group over here, when I mentioned to him, said, well, how can you make a lecture then? You know, all right. And second, as all of my students may attest to, this speech may induce drowsiness. Don't worry, you won't be the first one that ever fell asleep during my lecture. Okay. Now, when preparing this lecture and thinking about my life and my experience, it dawned on me that my life was a lot like the movie character Forrest Gump. No, I didn't win the Medal of Honor, and no, I wasn't shot in the buttocks, okay? But I did have a box of chocolate. And like Forrest's mom advised, you never know what you're going to get when you open the box. When I was at the University of Great Falls, we were approved by the American Bar Association to teach Army paralegals. As part of that approval, I was required as the department chair to go once a year to the JAG school in Charlottesville, Virginia. And there I would meet with the colonel who was heading the paralegal training directorate and their staff. One year, the colonel, and at least the colonel was in charge at that time, and his first sergeant and I were at the annual AFB conference. That's the American Association for Paralegal Educators. And the colonel was supposed to make a presentation the next day. Well, we were sitting there that night discussing the presentation, maybe having some adult beverages. And about that time, his first sergeant got a phone call. And visibly upset, she stepped away and came back and said that was her husband and her father-in-law had just died. She was torn. Do I get home and be with my husband and the family, or do I stay here for the next day and help my colonel with the presentation? She kind of looked at him and he looked back at her and there wasn't any doubt. He says, what do we always do? She says, flex and adapt. He says, that's right. You go pack your bags now, I'll make your travel arrangements. And that was the end of it. That phrase, flex and adapt, resonated with me, not only because it was sound advice about how to approach problems in the future, but also because it summarized how I've approached difficulties and setbacks throughout my life. The first time I opened my box of chocolate was August 12th, 1952, my birth date. I was a little too young to remember, but as I was told, I was a difficult birth. Apparently, I wasn't thrilled to join the world, and they had to deliver me by using force. It resulted in both my lungs collapsing and my head being flattened somewhat on one side. Well, as you can see, I survived, but as I'm told, I was pretty beat up. In fact, my father, upon seeing me for the first time, thought I was missing an ear and immediately passed out. Okay? But eventually, I got home. Everybody was happy that I survived and was thriving, and they never noticed that there were problems with my left arm. It was a while after my birth, they noticed it had no use, and my left arm just kind of hung there limply by my side. Well, they took me to a young orthopedic surgeon. We'll call him Dr. M for now. And they knew Dr. M. Surprisingly, Dr. M had a housewarming at the cottage he had at Ontario Point the same day I was born. All right. And upon examination, Dr. M found that my shoulder had been crushed, that the elbow was broken, and the wrist was broken on the left side. Dr. M thought the damage was so extensive that he couldn't repair it, but he had this wild idea that he thought of how he could at least restore some mobility to the arm. He placed me in a body cast, which I remained in for my first year of my life. When the cast was removed, miraculously, as my parents said, I was able to move it. The only problem, my arm was bent in a 45-degree angle, and my palm of my hand faced outward. Now, despite my arm being flexed, and that I flexed and adapted. And I had a pretty nice childhood. I had a great childhood, matter of fact. But when I was about 5 years old, my parents thought, well, maybe they could do something about the arm. They consulted another orthopedic surgeon who sent us to a Dr. C at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital down in New York. We met with Dr. C. Dr. C examined the arm and said, look it, can you stay a couple of days? I'm going to have my brace people work on developing a brace that Mark can wear. That was on a Friday. He said, can you wait till Monday? The answer was yes. We had a nice day on Saturday, New York City, and then we went to St. Patrick's Cathedral to Mass. You know, most people go to St. Patrick's and they pray, or they light a candle, or they give money. I didn't leave money. I left my breakfast. And immediately my parents took me home, canceled the appointment with Dr. C and that. Dr. C, though, said, well, look I took some measurements. I'll have my brace people design a brace and we'll send it up to Syracuse, which they did. It was made, and it was the most horrible thing in the world. I could wear it 15 or 20 minutes. I screamed, I yelled, I was in pain. Of course, I was a wimp, but my parents gave up. So 3 years go by. I'm now 8 years old. Back we go to see Dr. C. And he says to me, or he says to my parents, can you stay another day? They didn't let me eat after that. But he took some measurements and he said, look, my brace people are going to work on it, and they'll work through the night to make it so you can be fitted tomorrow and leave to go to Syracuse. Well, we go back. True to his word, the brace is ready. They try it on. It fits. It's kind of uncomfortable, but certainly tolerable. And I am told that I had to wear that every night until I was 13 years old. He also said at 13, the arm should be pretty much done growing, and we are going to operate on it. And basically what we're going to do is take the radius ulnar and turn it 180 degrees. That way the arm will be a little bit more usable. Of course, the brace was going to straighten it also. The palm would be turned in a little bit more, and you'll be in good shape. And I excited. I said, Doc, does this mean I'm going to be able to play baseball better? Because at that time, and now you can see I can't rotate my hand. I said, I'll be able to catch the ball. Maybe I can even make the major leagues. Dr. C didn't have a great sense of humor. He says, no, the only thing we're trying to achieve is so you can cleanse yourself. At 8 years old, I knew what that meant, and I rushed out into the hall and cried hysterically. My parents talked a little while longer with the doctor and then came out, and my mother was very, they tried to make me feel better and everything, and I blew up. I said, you mean the rest of my life I'm going to spend wearing a brace and have my arm operated on solely so I can wipe my... Now, you got to remember, You got to remember, I spent a number of years with my grandfather in his bus garage, and I had developed a colorful language by that point. But we won't go on to what I said. All right? All right. Now, that was my day in infamy, guys. Suddenly, after I calmed down, I had the realization that, my rest of my life is going to be flexing and adapting. And it worked real well until I got to middle school. Now, remember, I went to a two-room schoolhouse. Then I went to a bigger school. They actually had about 15 classrooms. And now I go to the West Genesee High School Middle School, and where I spent most of my life with blue-collar kids and farmers, I now have a bunch of high middle-class fathers or engineers, all of that stuff. And better yet, we had an advanced gym class. Amboy had no gym. Warner's, which was the other school, all it was a concrete basketball court inside. Now we have advanced equipment like gymnastic equipment. Now, gymnastics is a beautiful sport, but not if you're a little fat kid with a bent arm, okay? And now we have to do vaulting over the vault. I couldn't put the arm down. I became very adept. Either I would crash into the vault or I would go over it, never touching a thing, and land on my head. The parallel bars. You may all be familiar with the parallel bars. When in 8th grade, you can't quite get to the top of it. So the gym coach would have to boost you up. He'd boost me up. I immediately came down. He boosted out again. It was kind of like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, okay? And that drew some laughs. And then, of course, there were the rings. Well, now the rings are a great thing, and I admire those people that can do it. But with an arm that was kind of bent and 2.5 inches shorter, it looked great. Here I am on the rings. I was kind of like that cat. Did you ever see the posters from the 70s and 80s? The cat's hanging on by one paw to the curtain and says, "Hang in there, baby." That was me. But something dawned on me, which was very important to my life. I watched these people laugh. They were laughing because it was funny. They weren't really making fun of me. But what was I supposed to do? Well, I came up with this idea. You know how in the Olympics they score you 1 to 10, 10 being the best? They were going to score me on my crashes. Okay? I got so good that everybody was scoring me that I eventually learned that the gym coaches were also scoring me in secret. Okay? What did I learn from that? I learned that humor could be a shield for me in a lot of things. I also learned that if I made them laugh, they weren't going to see me cry. I was kind of like, and this to the older crowds, you guys won't remember, Mary Tyler Moore's show and Shuffles the Clown, a little dance, was a little song, a little dance, a little seltzer down their pants. That was me. I made them laugh, okay? Now, all right. All right. Now, I'm into high school. Don't worry, I'm going to cut college and law school short, okay? But I'm in high school, and 2 events occurred which would impact me again the rest of my life. The first thing is I had to have surgery on my arm. And a month or so before I had the surgery, my dad took me to play golf at a local golf course near our cottage. And, it was kind of like love at first swing. It was something I could do. The arm, I couldn't turn this way. I couldn't get it over my shoulder, but it worked pretty good this way. And that was good. Then the surgery occurred, and it really worked well. And I became a golfaholic. So some of my friends may be watching this live stream, okay? And Bob, I'm not naming you personally, but anyways, A lot of my buddies from camp would spend the day in their boats, skiing, going to the beach, and chasing girls. I went to the golf course, okay? And I spent a lot of time at the golf course. And I started to get better and better to the point where my junior year in high school, I finally won my first sports trophy ever in my life. And I was so proud. And that day, they had a little trophy presentation in the clubhouse. I went in, it was pretty crowded. And they made the presentation. My dad happened to be there with some other guys from Ontario Point. He had played that day. And I was feeling good. And as they handed me the trophy, I hear somebody say, "The drinks are on the house." I thought, geez, Dad, that's nice. Then I didn't realize it wasn't my dad. It was Dr. M, the guy that had placed me in the body cast the very first time. Years later, I said to him, I said, "Hey, Doc, why did you buy the drinks?" He says, "Because I knew what you had gone through. I knew what you had worked. I understood you." Keep that understand in mind. We'll get back to that, okay? The second event was my dad. We were coming home from a hockey practice one night, and my dad's not a real emotional guy. You know, he doesn't let his emotion out much. But on this occasion, it was a little different. And he says to me, "Mark, I've come to a decision." "Great, Dad. What is it?" He says, "I'm not going to be so hard on you anymore." He says, "Playing hockey." He says, "I realize you're not going to be able to be a college hockey player." I says, "Geez, Dad, I realized that 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, what took you so long?" And that type of thing, okay? But the point is, that night, up in my room, I got thinking, here's a guy that was an outstanding athlete. He was offered a minor league baseball contract. Everything he did was kind of right. And here he had a son that got cut from every team he tried out for or rode the bench. What an embarrassment I must be to my dad, type of thing. What did he have to be proud of? And what did my mom have to be proud of? And I said to myself that night, I promised I was going to make him proud. And for some reason, I thought being a lawyer would make him proud. You know, lawyers are right below used car salesmen on the popularity scale, okay? But anyways, I was going to make him proud. But the problem was I didn't know how to go about doing it. You know, it took all of my efforts in high school to be qualified to ride the bench. So I didn't pay a lot of attention to my academics. And now it comes to my senior year. I want to go to college. And I wasn't a hot prospect, okay? I now go to my guidance counselor, Mr. V. Remember that. Mr. V will come up through the rest of this lecture. Mr. V says to me, "I think I can get you into my college," which was Siena. Well, he made the application for Siena and a school called St. John Fisher. Several days after that conversation, I had to go to sign my application that he had prepared. And he said, "Matt," I was going by my first name then, Matthew, new identity, you know. He says, "Matt, I filled out your applications, and afterwards I had to go to confession." I said, "Well, that's fine. Thank you. And but lo and behold, I got accepted at St. John's and Siena. Now the good news is my daughter Megan graduated from St. John's. The other good news is I didn't go there. Okay, so we go to a school visit at that time, and they had just gone to open dormitories. The first dorm we go in, there's a guy and a girl in there. And my mother wasn't too thrilled about it. I thought it was a nice idea, but that kind of put a chill on St. John's. But we go to Siena, and here we are at Siena, beautiful day. It's got a pretty campus, small school, only 1,500 at that time, but it's beautiful. And who's my tour guide but a guy named Bill Probilski, who had been my goalie a couple of years before in hockey. And he takes us all around, and we get, the last stop is the cafeteria. And outside the cafeteria is a gentleman named Father Ben Kuhn, okay? Now, Ben Kuhn was one of the 8 priests from this fine school named St. Bonaventure, who left. Maury back there is a graduate of St. Bonnie's, okay? And they left to create Siena. Father Ben was everything you would picture a Franciscan friar to be. He was kind of big, he was kind of round, his hair, it was kind of bald, so it looked like he had a tonsure on top. And he was standing there greeting everybody in his brown Franciscan robes. The only exception was on his head was a New York Yankees baseball hat. Well, my mother talked with him and instantly fell in love at first sight. In other words, she fell in love with Ben Kuhn, and Siena was in my sight, okay? Now, all right, August 1970, orientation. I show up, blue blazer, nice tie, gray slacks, saddle shoes, okay? The only problem, a majority of the students there were from Long Island, okay? And it was in the midst of the hippie revolution. I show up attired the way I am because my mother lived by 2 maxims. You never had to apologize for looking your best, and 2, you never got a chance to make a first impression twice. So I show up and everybody else is in coveralls, t-shirts, long hair. Yep, I'm the fish out of water. It got better though. The professor running the orientation hands out schedules. I look at my schedule, it says sociology major. I go to the professor, I said, sir, I think I'm supposed to be a paralegal or a poli-sci major. He says, well, do you think the registrar would have come up with making you a sociology major if you hadn't said that? That question kind of stumped me, so I was a sociology major for the rest of my career. Okay, this is where my box of chocolate was opened again. First semester, freshman year, I worked hard. I worked so hard, I got a 2.8, okay? And I was thinking, well, my chances of making my parents proud and going to law school probably just went out the window. At which point, I started my second semester, and I had a class called family law. Fellow teaching family law was a tough German Franciscan, grew up in the coal area of Pennsylvania, named Father Bob Gable. And he says to me as I get in class, and he calls roll, he says, hey, I want to see you after class. I thought, great, first day of class, already I'm in trouble, okay? So he says to me, hey, you know, you're in the second semester of your freshman year. I'm your advisor. How come you haven't come to see me? Being astute, I said, am I supposed to? He told me, no, I better. That started it, guys. I went to see him later that day, told him I wanted to be a lawyer, and he said to me in no uncertain terms, listen, you do what I say for the next 4 years, and you'll get into law school. Now, I wasn't the smartest guy, but I was smart enough to take that as direction, okay? Now, Father Gable, better known to me as Father Bob, became my advisor, my mentor, my coach, my drill instructor, my confessor, and most importantly, my friend. He insisted that I study at least 6 hours a day beyond the time I spent in class. He made me take copious notes. He had me make outlines and study guides. and for exams. He met with me at least once a week so I could give him progress reports. He laughed with me in good times and cried with me in bad times. He never let my emotions get too high nor too low. One of the things he liked to say to me is, Matt, you can't afford self-pity, okay? And he made me understand, like the great golfer Gary Player said, that the harder I worked, the luckier I got, okay? All right, now, here's another great professor, Father Noel Fitzpatrick. It was late October, my sophomore year, and I had Father Noel for ontology, better known as logic. Most of my students love when I talk about that too, right? So anyways, I did it, and earlier that year in September, I met a girl named Debbie. And at that time, I thought she was the girl of my dreams, all right? We met at a mixer in September, and from that time on, we were basically inseparable. The only bad part was that my new infatuation was having a negative effect on my academic performance. Enter Father Noel. It was Parents' Weekend, and it was Sienna tradition to have a casino night in our gym on Saturday night, a Parents' Weekend. My parents, especially my mom, loved Parents' Weekend. And we were there, and Debbie was with me, and my parents and that. And the next thing I know, here's Father Noel at our table. I introduced him to my parents, to Debbie, and he says to me, Matt, I hear you're in love. Debbie and I both smile and say, oh, yes, we are. He says, that's great. He said, but unless you change your amorous way, you got a great chance of failing my class. That's nice in front of Debbie, in front of my parents, but not willing to take a back seat. I said, hey, Father, I bet you a beer. In those days, you could be 18 and drink, and we had a great rascal. And I said, Father, I bet you a beer I'll get an A. I wasn't quite smart enough to realize the professor still controls the grade book, okay? I got a B, and I bought him a beer. But I learned a great lesson, and that was he cared, okay? Now, I mended my ways. I went on. I ended up finishing number 2 in my class in sociology. I finished in the top 10%. I got accepted to law school and looked like I was on my way. I'm at graduation now. Here is Mr. V again. His sister and I were classmates, and he's at graduation. And he says to me, hey, Matt, what are you going to do now you graduate? I said, well, Mr. V, I have been waitlisted at Albany Law and Buffalo Law, and I'm sure I'm going to law school in the fall. Mr. V, again, being the positive portion of my life, says, don't be disappointed, Matt. A lot of people don't get into law school. Fine. Well, I went on to law school, to Albany. I got accepted, both of them. I came off the wait list, and we were accepted at Albany and that. All right. And now I'm studying for the bar. Once again, I run into Mr. V. What are you doing, Matt? Mr. V, I just graduated from law school, and I'm studying for the bar. Matt, don't be disappointed if you don't pass it. A lot of people don't pass it the first time. Fine. Well, I passed the bar exam the first time. I got married, had 3 wonderful children. There they are up there, 6 wonderful grandchildren. And let me give you the quick introduction. We're going from your right to left. That's Sean. Right next to him is his wife, Sarah. Right in front of them is Sophia, their daughter. Now going down, that is Steve, my very wonderful and brave son-in-law who was in Special Forces. The one that my son claims the bravest thing he ever did was marry his sister, and she's the one just to the right of him, okay? My daughter, Megan. They're holding Hudson, the youngest of my grandchildren. Going further down, the guy with the beard looks a little bit like, well, he's a good guy. He's got a hockey jersey on, okay? That's Ryan. In front of him is my daughter-in-law, Kirsten, and then the two kids are Rowan and Phoebe. Okay, they're two children. Oh, I didn't identify the two in front of my daughter. That is Preston and Ansley. Ansley's my oldest. She's going to be 13 this year. And guys, that's part of the reason why I'm calling it quits here and heading home. They've all sacrificed for me. All the grandchildren were born after I started this teaching odyssey. I never get to see them more than 2 or 3 days a year. And my children, I'm terribly proud of them. They have raised 6 great kids. They're polite, they're smart, they're respectful, and I figure I got to get back there and screw them up somehow. Okay? So, all right. Now, all right. Here's what happens. I go on, all right? I started out, I got hired by the little law firm, all right? I kept moving to bigger law firms until I was making more money than I ever imagined. The final big law firm I was with had its own plane and its own pilot. On many days, I would fly off at 6 a.m. and not return to 11 p.m., but at least I was home each night. I became the youngest president in the history of the Onondaga County Bar Association, its 113-year history. I was chosen one of the Junior Chamber of Commerce Persons of the Year. I won other awards and got my name in the newspaper several times. Okay? Enter Mr. V again. I'm at a youth summer league lacrosse game watching my sons when I spot Mr. V waving at me across the field to join him. He tells me that his son is playing. Mr. V married a little later in life and had children later. And as I noticed his son, I was particularly pleased. It looked like my sons were kicking the bank out of him. Okay? But anyways, Mr. V said to me, look, I've been following your successes in the paper, and I wanted to congratulate you. He finished by saying, Matt, I always knew you were going to be a success. Thomas Edison once said, success is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. As I walked away from Mr. V that day, I realized my hard work was what led to my success, and that despite what other people thought of me, you can always succeed. Okay? Now, and I promised you I wouldn't use any 4-letter words, but I got to use the word can't. I don't believe in the word can't, because if a guy like me could get here, there's got to be ways of getting there, because I sure aren't very talented, okay? All right. Now, all right, here's the unique thing. Despite all of these things supposedly I accomplished, I still didn't feel very good about myself. I read a bunch of self-help books. I had started counseling here and there. And then, again, my box of chocolate opened up. I played golf with my son, Ryan. It's the one way down to the left. And after lunch, after playing, we went out to lunch. And I started saying stuff like, well, Grandpa, that's my dad, said I should do this. And Grandpa said I should do that. And Grandpa this. And about this time, Ryan, who has a temper like mine, blew up. He says, you know, Dad, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the fact that you've succeeded. And all I ever hear is, I'm not like Grandpa. You're not like this. You're not like that. He said, why don't you get over it? I'm sick of it. It hurt. It hurt a lot. Because basically he told my life I was living a phony life. I wasn't being myself. And at that point, kind of like the veil was lifted off my eyes, and I finally saw myself. Sally Field once said that you got to start judging yourself through your own eyes. Well, I started that day, okay, and I stopped trying to please everybody. There's a famous saying by somebody, I can't remember who it is, who said, I don't know the key to success, but the key to failure is trying to please everybody. Well, I felt pretty good about myself. And another thing was about to happen. It was my beloved wife. And my beloved wife said to me, you know, Mark, you come home after teaching at Syracuse, where I was an adjunct in the paralegal department. You're always happy. You're always happy to go. You're always happy to come back. You're not like that when you come back from the law office. She said, have you ever thought of teaching full time? Let's try it, okay? I was at that yogi fork in the road. But fortunately, thanks to Ann and a lot of other stuff, I chose the fork that led me to teach. And give me a second, let me recite a little phrase from Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Teaching has made all the difference in my life, guys. I'm happy. All right? But now I made a decision. I'm going down that right fork, but what am I going to do when I get there? Yeah, I taught as an adjunct, but any of you who ever taught as an adjunct will certainly convince you you don't know anything about teaching, okay? And here I am out at the University of Great Falls. But just before that, I was before Ryan gave me a set of brains. I went to a parents' weekend at his college at Buffalo, and the guest speaker there was a guy named Mitch Albom. I don't know if you've ever heard of Mitch Albom. He's a syndicated columnist. He's written a bunch of books, but one of the ones he wrote, one of the first ones he wrote, is this book, Tuesday with Maury. Now, if you haven't read Tuesday with Maury, let me tell you, Dr. Jane Greer said that it's a poignant and powerfully moving. Tuesdays with Maury captures the essence and spirit of a great teacher and his unwavering belief that the most important lesson in life is connecting with another through compassion and love. I don't remember an awful lot about Mr. Albom's speech, but there was one thing that I do remember. And he said, in life, be somebody's Maury. And I thought about that. I thought about, could I be somebody's Maury? All right. And, but I still had some stuff to figure out. All right. Now, what did I do? Here's Yogi again. I observed a lot by watching. And part of what I watched is guys like Father Noel Patrick that I told you about, Noel Fitzpatrick, and Father Bob. Okay? Now, Father Noel died when he was in his late 40s, unfortunately. I was in my first year of law school in Albany, right near Siena. I got to go to the funeral. And at that funeral, they read one of his favorite things. It was an old monk's poem, and he read it often. I had heard it before. He mentioned it in class of that. But let me read it to you again. It's called The Touch of the Master's Hand. 'Twas battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to waste his time on the old violin, but he held it up with a smile. What am I bidding, good people? He cried. Who'll start the bidding for me? $1, $1 now, two, only two, $2 once, $2 twice. who will make it three? $3 once, $3 twice, and going for three. But no, from the room far back, a gray-haired man came forward and picked up the bow. Then wiping the dust from the old violin and tightening up the strings, he played a melody pure and sweet as the angel sings. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, with a voice that was quiet and low, said, "What am I bid for the old violin?" And he held it up with a bow. 1,000 once, 2,000 twice. Who'll make it three? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice, and going and gone, said he. The people cheered, but some of them cried, "We don't quite understand. What changed its worth?" Swift came the reply, "The touch of the master's hand." And many a man with life out of tune and battered and torn with sin is auctioned cheap to a thoughtless crowd, much like the old violin. A mass of porridge, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He is going once, he is going twice, he is going and almost gone. But the master comes, and the foolish crowd can never understand the worth of a soul and the change that's wrought by the touch of a master's hand. You know, I thought about that, and I've read it. Maybe some of you have even heard me read it in class, all right? And when I started here at FTCC, I was required to go to an orientation, okay? And part of the orientation involved a meeting with former President Dr. Keene and some other members of the new faculty. And I can remember Dr. Keene talking about the fact that a lot of our students here aren't going to be those bright-eyed high school graduates. They're going to be people that are older, that have been beat up in life, some of them, and have had tough times and wanted to start a new life. And I got thinking, boy, that's just what that touch of the master hand was talking about. So, okay, I was going to, not that I thought I was in the master's hand, but I was going to take that into consideration. But how was I going to teach? How was I going to approach it? And here comes one of the other favorite stories I have. I read it long before I ever started teaching. And it's called The Boy and the Puppy. Okay? A farmer had some puppies he needed to sell and painted a sign advertising the 4 pups and set about nailing it to the post on the edge of his yard. As he was driving the last nail into the post, he felt a tug on his overalls. He looked down into the eyes of a little boy. "Mister," he said, "I want to buy one of your puppies." "Well," said the farmer, as he rubbed the sweat off the back of his neck, "these puppies come from pretty good parents, and they cost a good deal of money." The boy dropped his head for a moment, and then reaching deep into his pocket, he pulled out a handful of change and held it up to the farmer. "I got 39 cents. Is that enough to take a look?" "Sure," said the farmer, and with that he let out a whistle. "Hello, Dolly, come here." Out from the doghouse and down the ramp ran Dolly, followed by 4 little balls of fur. The little boy pressed his face to the chain-link fence. His eyes danced with delight. As the dogs made their way to the fence, the little boy noticed something else stirring inside the doghouse. Slowly, another little ball appeared, this one noticeably smaller. Down the ramp it slid. Then, in a somewhat awkward manner, the little pup began hobbling toward the others, doing the best to catch up. "I want that one," said the little boy, pointing to the runt. The farmer knelt down next to him and said, "Son, you don't want that little dog, okay?" He says he's never going to be able to run and jump and play with you like the other pups. Well, at this point, the little boy stepped back, reached down, and began rolling up one leg of his trousers. In doing so, he revealed a steel brace running down both sides of his leg, attaching itself in a specially made shoe. Looking back up the farmer, he said, "You see, sir, I don't run too well myself, and he will need someone who understands. With tears in his eye, the farmer reached down, picked up the little pup. Holding it carefully, he handed it to the little boy. How much? Asked the little boy. No charge, answered the farmer. There's no charge for love. The world is full of people who need someone who understands. Well, it was clear to me what I was, after watching Father Bob, Father Noel, Dr. M, and a lot of the older men that asked me to play golf with them over the years. And I decided that the best way to be a Maury is to care and understand, to realize. Like that lame puppy in the story, everybody deserves to be recognized, respected, and loved. Every person has their own value and should never be judged by their outward appearance. With sincere support, they can achieve wonderful things in life and become an inspiration to all. Okay? We've tried that in our program. I sound like I'm bragging, but Mr. Locklear and I, on many occasions, get together and talk about a student. And this student, maybe their child's been sick, or this student maybe has had a death in the family, or as we all know, maybe a spouse has been deployed or something. And maybe they can't take a test this Wednesday when we've scheduled it, okay? Does it hurt us if they take a test next week or the week after? Are they any dumber because they didn't take the test today? And we've done pretty well with that idea of flexing and adapting. And I'm pretty proud. I'm real proud of Mr. Locklear for doing that. Okay? Now, what's my time look like, guys? Have I exhausted it yet? Huh? Annie, should I talk about Eric or not? Okay, stick with me, guys. Here we go with the last part of it, okay? Now, I got a wardrobe change here, guys. I promise I won't be like Janet Jackson, okay? I gave my speech at University of Great Falls, and it was called The Things My Brother Taught Me. In a minute, you'll hear about Eric. He was Down syndrome. But he was a Special Olympian, and he was a great guy. I'll tell you a little bit about him. But the point is, this particular shirt, I was asked to give that speech, the lessons my brother taught me, at the Montana Special Olympics. And a couple days later, this shirt shows up in an envelope. And in it was a note saying, the Special Olympians decided you needed a gift for you coming and speaking to them. And they all signed this shirt and sent it to me. I'm pretty proud of it. It's one of the greatest gifts I've ever received, okay? And so what are we going to talk about here now? Have you ever noticed how a simple phrase becomes associated with a person, so much so that they almost become one? Like, for example, Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. President Abraham Lincoln, a house divided against itself cannot stand. President Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And Dr. Martin Luther King, I have a dream. Just as those phrases became identified with the people, so did I've got good news become associated with my brother. He used that all the time. Usually when I called him, when he was living in Florida with my parents, he always had, I got good news. And it was a trip to Disneyland, or it was this, or it was that. And my parents would all go, oh, no, Eric, that's not true. But sure enough, a couple weeks later, we found out it was true. The only time he ever really disappointed is he says, I got good news. What is it, Eric? We bought a Corvette. Sean and Ryan both had their license at the time. They thought, wow, this is great. I don't know whatever happened to the Corvette, but it never showed up. Okay? All right. But anyways, First time I heard I got good news, I was 16 years old. I just got home from a football game. My high school had beat my father's alma mater. I was feeling pretty good. I was giving him a hard time. And the first time I heard I got good news was then. My mother said to me and my sister and that, I got good news. What is it, Mom? I was thinking maybe a new car. I just had got my license. Maybe it was a trip to go see relatives. And she said, I'm pregnant. Later that night, I thought about it and I couldn't see what good news there was in that announcement. But little did I know, some 6 months later, Eric David Groboski would be born, and he would be the greatest gift we could have in our family. Now, Eric was Down syndrome. In the old days, my days, it was called retarded. We no longer use that term, but we used to say stuff like, Eric may be mentally disabled, but he's not dumb. Eric was one of the smartest guys I ever met, and he certainly had a lot of wisdom. I like to say if the three wise men came together, Eric would still have much more wisdom than they did, okay? Now, I know we're running out of time. Let me just give you two examples that came from the speech. Okay, here's actually it's three, I lied, okay? The first lesson was how to compete. I hate to admit it, but I was a poor loser. It seems odd that I was a poor loser, seeing I had plenty of experience in it. I always smiled, shook hands, and all that stuff. But I learned different when Eric became involved as a Special Olympian. He started when he was about 8 or 9 years old and continued on until he was 32 years old. And I watched him compete in a lot of Special Olympics. It always impressed me. Watching those. They would always say their motto when they first began, and that motto for the Special Olympics was, "Let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt." Well, watching those Special Olympians made me believe that whether it be in the courtroom or in the field, competition is about having fun and competing. And I got a little better at it. I didn't take it so hard, thanks to my brother. What was interesting about my brother is, I fashioned myself, I told you, a great bench warmer that I was, okay? The farthest I ever got was 30 miles away playing sports. That was to play Lafayette High School and lacrosse. My brother competed in the International Special Olympics in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That's one story. So he taught me how to be better. Another lesson, this is one, is you ever hear the song, "Sing like no one's listening, love like you've never been hurt, dance like nobody's watching, and live like it's heaven on earth"? Well, that was Eric. He embodied that. Now, I know he doesn't know who said that or anything like that, but that was the life that he was like. And Eric, when it moved him, stood up and started singing, or got up and started dancing. Now, my parents would go out to supper clubs once a week in Florida with my dad's cousin. And there was always this guy there playing where they went called Bobby Kelly. Well, Bobby Kelly, one of his featured songs was New York, New York. Well, Eric, hearing New York, New York, thought that he should join in. And he would usually stand up. Well, Bobby Kelly eventually got smart and made him part of the show. And so every time New York, New York, Eric would sing it. Well, my dad's cousin died, his wife remarried, my parents no longer could drive, so that was a supper club. That went out the window. Until a couple of days, a week or so after my brother died, they get a phone call. And it's from Agnes, my dad's cousin, ex-wife. She says, "I want you to know this." She says, "The other day, Joe, Sam, whatever her new husband was, and I went out to dinner with some other people, and we go in, and Bobby Kelly's there. And we haven't seen Bobby Kelly in 5 or 6 years. So at the break, I walk up to Bobby and I say, hey, Bobby, you may not remember me. We used to come with the Down syndrome boy, Eric. And at that point, he says, just wait a minute, ma'am. And he walked over to his piano, picked up a picture and came back. And it was a picture of Eric and him singing New York, New York. And he said at that point, he turned to the crowd. He says, hey, listen, ladies and gentlemen, I just heard a good friend of mine has died. Will you join me in a song in his honor? Please sing New York, New York with me. That made me realize that, you know what? It didn't matter how bright you were or anything else. If you cared, loved, people recognized it. The last story, and it's the hardest one I've got to have, and that's he taught me how to die. Ann and I were coming back for we had just finished teaching. We'd started a little late that day. We were probably in the border of Montana and North Dakota, and I noticed my phone was all lit up. And I picked it up and I called. It was my mom. I said, what's up? She says, your brother's dying. I said, how long? She said, we're not sure he's going to make it through the night, maybe tomorrow. Well, if you know anything about the West, I wasn't anywhere near an airport, and we decided to keep going on. And I said, but let me talk to Eric, will you? So I get Eric on the phone, and this kid never complained about anything. I said, Eric, what are you doing? He says, I'm in the hospital. I said, what in the heck are you doing in the hospital? I said, you know, kidding. Is the food better there? Mom not taking care of you or something like that? Never said he was dying or anything. I said, hey, look at Eric. We'll be home in a couple of days. You know our routine. Your birthday is already gone. We go shopping together. We're going to get your birthday present. You better get out of that place so we can get your birthday present. Okay, brother. It was never brother, by the way. It was brother, B-R-U-D-D-E-R. Okay, brother. By the way, he always called me his little brother. Okay? People would always be amazed when I showed up about a foot taller, 16 years older, but I was his little brother. Okay? Well, unfortunately, what was Nanny? The next day we got the call and he had passed. But it was that dignity in which he didn't complain. He didn't do anything like that. All right, guys, let me finish up. First of all, let me say some thanks, okay? I want to say, I don't think any of them are here, but I want to say thanks to our housekeeping staff, and in particular, Miss Tammy and Mr. Derek. These people have been incredible all my years here. And without people like that, students don't want to come to our building. And if students don't come to our building, we don't have anybody to teach. And if we don't have anybody to teach, we're on the breadline. So they're very important, and they've always gone out of their way to help me. Whenever we've had a flood, which, by the way, Dean, happens in our suite once in a while. But anything like that, they're always there fixing that, okay? So those are the first people I want to say thanks to. The next one, I couldn't have done it without Janan back there at the controls, Janan, and Joe and Justin, who have helped put this together. Amanda Calors, who booked this for us. Just great people we have here. Okay. I want to say thanks to the administration. A little more than 9 years ago, I came here. I was 62 years old. I was interviewed by Kelly and Cindy Burns, and for some reason they hired me. Who in the blank would hire a 62-year-old guy? But they did. Little did I know, I found out a secret a couple of years ago. Over here, Sarah says, we were really impressed. You came all the way here for a personal interview from Montana. I says, Montana? The hell? I was in Syracuse when I came. Little did I know, had they known I only came from Syracuse, I may not have got the job. Okay? Okay. All right. So thanks, and I thank the upper administration. All right? I want to thank my colleagues, and a lot of you are here. it's been fun being your teammates in that, okay? In particular, I want to thank way in the back, Jim Moisley. Jim has been such a friend throughout this thing. I mean, I didn't even know how to turn the computer on when I got here, okay? A lot of you might think I haven't learned that yet either, but he was great, and I want to thank you, Jim. You've been a pal, all right? If you're listening, and you should be, my sister Althea and my brother-in-law Peter, I wouldn't be on this journey but for them. A few years ago, my parents really needed constant care, and she brought them from Florida to her home in Massachusetts, got her a home next door, and cared for them. If she hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been here. So thanks, Allie, and thanks, Pete, for everything you've done. I want to thank my children and grandchildren. As I've told you, they put up with a lot having me away. And now, I want to thank Vaughn, okay? Vaughn has been a great pal, great colleague, great teacher. Now, I have worn this sweater on many occasions, and each time, Vaughn nicely says, "That's a great looking sweater. I like it." Okay? Using the biblical term, I think he's even coveted it. Okay? Vaughn, you're not getting it. I decided I liked it too much. So I went on a search to get you one like that. This time of year, it's tough to get a sweater. Okay? But I flexed and adapted. And here's the best I can do, Vaughn. So please accept this. Get up here, will you? Don't you know your lines? Thank you. And when you wear that, I don't know. But anyway. And last, guys, I really wouldn't be here but for Annie G. She's been with me throughout everything. She encouraged me. One of the greatest strengths why we've been pretty good is she understands. I'm not the easiest guy to live with. I got a temper, and I still get frustrated when I can't do something, and I blow up. And just kind of goes, "Oh dear," and goes and does something else and puts up with it. Like Cokie Roberts would said, everybody needs somebody to say, "Poor baby." And that was Ann, poor baby. She didn't excuse it. She didn't say what I was doing was right, but she just accepted it. And who would leave her life, her home, everything else in Syracuse to go to Montana? Not that Montana isn't a wonderful spot, and my friends who are listening from the University of Great Falls, it was wonderful. But we moved out there and we didn't even know what our apartment was going to look like. Okay, we got it online. But Annie was there with me through the whole thing. Would you come up here, please, Annie? Here's just a little token of my appreciation for everything you've done. Now, guys, you can sit down. Go ahead. Yeah. Guys, I went through all my yogiisms, okay, except one, okay? It ain't over till it's over. Well, guys, it's over. Thank you very much. And in my best, by the way, I can hear the elephants outside. The circus is about here. I want to say to you in my best New York way, I usually end class this way, get out of here. Okay? Thank you. I gotta have my soda.
Okay, yeah. All right, so we
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations to Mr. Mark. There's a couple of students that have something to say to Mr. Mark and give him something.
The time's up.
I know, but they still, and then after that, Dean Gold has something she would like to give Mr. Mark as well. And these
Like
two
Things
students that are coming up, they would always disagree with one another. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it was. If there was a spot on the wall and that spot was red, one would say red, the other one might say light shade of red, pink, or it didn't matter what it was. They would always disagree. So here's Mr. Neeson and Mr. Sean.
Well, I don't know how I follow up that speech Mr. G gave. That was pretty good. But you had a lot of great stories, a lot of stories we haven't heard, which is why I wonder, like, you only told the 5 same stories for 2 years. Those are some good ones we didn't get to hear until now. But yeah, like Mr. Locklear said, I'm Sean, this is Denise. We were in class a year and a half ago, I think. We're a bit like Walter Matthau and what was his name? Jack Lemmon in The Odd Couple. She's more Walter Matthau. For all the youngsters, that's a really old movie. Okay. I didn't really prepare a speech. I'm just kind of coming up here and winging it and trying to butter up the crowds because Denise has that really nice speech prepared. So I don't want to step on her toes. But you were saying earlier about a phrase that becomes synonymous with someone like Abraham Lincoln, JFK, and stuff. You actually have your own phrase too. Sue everyone in sight. That was the first thing we learned in Mr. G's class. Once you decide you have a lawsuit, sue everyone in sight, from the business owner to the board of directors to down to the custodian. Everyone's involved until you eliminate them. So thank you for that legal advice. In all honesty, it was really fun. We learned a lot from Mr. G. Everyone enjoyed his instruction. And I know the school is going to miss him. Although, Mr. Locklear, when you retire, I'm coming back. You're getting the same treatment. So anyway, here's Denise.
Maybe I'll come up here so I can hear you.
Yeah, you can stand right there.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I already got this one over here, this guy right here. So I had to come back. I live all the way in Wake County. So I've been with Mr. G since 2019. And when Lex classes, you had to be in person. So I used to drive from Wake County every day. Mr. G made that a little bit easier. But here we go. Mr. Groboski, fondly known as Mr. G, because he knows no one can say Groboski without messing it up. Mr. G, the man, the attorney, the professor, the legend. I'll start with the man. Mr. G, the man, what can I say? What a guy. From the stories of his 2 to 3 wives, with Mrs. Ann being his forever love, to his brother Eric and his dad, whom he lost in 2020. Every day, Mr. G gave a peek into his personal life. He exemplifies the values of family, integrity, and humility. As a man, Mr. G has no problem saying, I stand corrected in an event he has made a mistake or is incorrect. And without hesitation, he offers an apology and acknowledges his mistake. Such actions laid a foundation for great respect, and that in a nutshell is Mr. G, the man. Mr. G, the attorney. He is an attorney through and through, with a profound profession for the law, but only in the states of Montana and New York. Because he has never practiced a day in North Carolina. Mr. G has always recognized he would not have been such an amazing attorney without his paralegal, Kathy, who he would tell us she was a saint. However, he admitted that attorneys are the worst business people because they always give free legal advice, especially to family and friends. He was such a great attorney, his son followed in his footsteps. Nonetheless, he retired from practicing law and suing everybody in sight. Upon retiring from his practicing attorney in 2008, his passion for the law never wavered. So after a few nudges and pep talks from his wife, he continued to share his wealth of knowledge in the capacity as a professor. This leads me to Mr. G, the professor. Mr. G, the professor. This is the man we have all come to know and love and celebrate today. Mr. G came to us from the University of Great Falls, and he has been the backbone, the department chair of the FTCC Paralegal Technology Program for the past 8 years, while also being the judge and jury of his classroom. In the classroom, Mr. G, your study guides will forever be remembered because they were literally the map to passing your classes. If you did your study guide, you will pass. Simple math for us paralegals. No matter how many stories, Mr. G, you would tell, they could be verified in the book or by a simple Google search. Just like the famous Stella with the burning hot coffee from McDonald's lawsuit and settlement.
That was one of those 5 stories.
Yes. And then there is Mr. G's infamous quote, "Sue everybody in sight." That will forever ring in our ears and remind us of his crazy sense of humor. Sometimes people miss the point of your story, but Mr. G, your stories were always relatable to the course content and your intentions were always good. As a student, we went through COVID with you. Mr. G, it was a learning experience for all of us. We had many trials and tribulations with technology. It was tough, but we had plenty of bloopers along the way. One of those bloopers I will never forget. I can't remember which class it was, but we had to watch a movie. And Mr. G did not change the movie over to share his screen with the people at home. So the people at home literally watched Mr. G watch the movie. We never told them. But we helped each other and we made it through like a family. As the professor, Mr. G, you have always instilled in us that paralegals are a pillar in a law firm and the foundation for the attorneys. Paralegals do everything. Throughout our academic journey, those words always provide a certain degree of confidence and encouragement. Such words bring me to Mr. G, the legend. Mr. G, the legend, the living legend. Mr. G, the legend who leaves behind a great legacy. No matter if someone's path is to be a paralegal or a future attorney, you, Mr. G, have inspired and ignited a passion for many in law. Mr. G, you have been supportive intentionally and unintentionally. If you derive from your path, Mr. G will make a way for you to continue to pursue your education and ensure academic work-life balance. Mr. G, you have become a household name to many, a mentor to some, and family to all. There have been times you pushed us out of our comfort zone, but you knew that it would lead to greatness. Mr. G, you have given us lifelong tools and resources, creating a debt that can never be repaid. And for that, we are forever grateful. But we know you don't seek to be repaid. You only want to see us be successful. Our success is your success. And for that, we will forever be indebted to you. I'm sure that me, the people in this room, and some beyond this room have the same exact sentiment, that they consider themselves to be blessed, not lucky, to have experienced Mr. G, the man, the attorney, the professor, the legend. Thank you, Mr. G, for the experience. I want to thank your wife, Mrs. Ann, for sharing him with us. We considered ourselves favored. Mr. G, we love you and we'll miss you, but we will always know that you are there.
Thank you, buddy. Can I say one thing
Sure.
before I do?
It's your day.
Hey, guys, after I finally figured my life out a little bit and all of that, I always said, You know, my goal in life is if I could make one person think their life was better because they met me, I'd be satisfied. Denise and Sean, thank you. I've fulfilled my life. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm going to be very short. Mark, I have enjoyed every laugh, every tear, every argument. And you leave here today a success in knowing that you filled your purpose. And we appreciate you. And I love you.
I love you too. Thank you for everything, you know.
Thank you.
You know, the only thing better than hugging your dean is kissing a
I did want to say one more thing. We do have refreshments and cake for you in the back. We also have some gifts for you that we want you to unwrap that have come from your paralegal program. We have cards, and we want you to enjoy your day, even though you're leaving us. We want you to enjoy your day. So we have some gifts back there. You have some unpacking to do, but you really have packing to do because we still need you to leave. So, but you know, it's all in good.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.